very excited to be here today with you. What a great crowd. This is fantastic. So as we start today, I want to say thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for being committed to growing public transit. And I want you to take a minute, if you don't already have a pencil and paper or a pen and paper, to go ahead and get one if you can. And also, I can't see the chat right now, but I do want you to go ahead and say who you are and where you're from if you want to in the chat, and give a shout out to give people an idea if they're not looking at this view visually. So as we get started today, I want you to consider that each of us sees the world through our own lenses. And I want you to recognize that you're viewing the world through your own set of lenses, and that those that you work with, you collaborate with, and the public you most want to better engage with are all seeing the world through their own lenses. This is a quote from Michael Margulies that I love, and he is the head of the Get Storied agency and the book Story 10 Times. And he helps organizations that really want to do culture shift tell stories in a way that really engage not only the investors, the leadership, but also the public. And that's really what we want to talk about today, is how to be better storytellers, to be better connectors and collaborators. So who am I to be talking to you today about this subject? Well, I came into the world of advocacy for active mobility and sustainability and public transit through bike advocacy just over a decade ago in Long Beach, California. And I am a storytelling, communications, and media relations coach focused on active mobility, public transit, and sustainability. But I named my organization Pedal Love because I was a bike advocate at the time, but I liked the play on words, that Pedal Love meant more than just biking, because the truth was that back when I lived in Long Beach, I lived car free. And I rode the bus and I rode the train just as much as I rode my bike. So you know that public transit is a crucial solution for many of the things that we need to deal with today, for safer roads, for greater equity, and to have a sustainable planet for everybody. But we're not moving fast enough to tell the story we need to better engage the funders, to better engage the city powers that be and the public, so that we can really have a public transit system that actually works for everybody. We need to become better storytellers, and we need to learn from people who are great marketers and storytellers who peddle love for their projects and services. So let's take a look at what we're going to learn today. Well, first, I'm going to do a little breakout. I want you to write down 3 places that you would like to become a better communicator over the next 3 to 6 months. And I'm going to time us. We're just going to take a couple of minutes right now, and I want you to write down 3 places. Now, this could be personal. This could be with the company that you work with, the organization you work with, the community that you work with, or both. So 3 places where you would like to be a better communicator. So I'm going to time us right now. Go. 3 places you want to be a better communicator in the next 3 to 6 months. Three places you want to be a better communicator in the next 3 to 6 months. Is it in writing? Do you want to do a podcast? Do you want to be good at media interviews? Do you want to give a keynote? Do you want to give a presentation such as I'm giving today? Or maybe you are giving a presentation, but you have goals for what you'd like to do in the future. So 3 places that you'd like to be better at your communications, and or that the organization you work with can be better at their communication. So maybe they do email newsletters or community newsletters that you would like to see improved. Maybe they do public service announcements. Maybe they do online events such as this one, and you'd like all of you to be better communicators. So write those 3 things down. And we're just about ready to wrap that up for 2 minutes. Okay, so wrap that up, and we're going to set that aside, and we're going to come back to it. So here's what I'm going to talk about today very briefly: why stories have superpowers. It's all about the science. Why you need to become a solutions storyteller now. And I'm going to touch on my 15-step story map that I actually am going to share a link to my Google Doc that you can download it today if you like. So why are stories so compelling to the human brain? It turns out that science has learned how to research this, and that the human brain is wired for stories. It's in our DNA. Now, I could fill hours of information about the scientific research, but I'm going to share just 3 key highlights with you that I think you're going to find interesting, and it's going to be applicable to the work that you're doing. So the first key takeaway that I want you to know about is that storytelling breeds compassion. It turns out that information that we share with emotionally engaging content actually engages something called the affective empathy network in the human brain. So storytelling actually breeds compassion, and it allows people to see the world from very different perspectives that otherwise they weren't able to see. Let me give you an example of this from another time in history when things were really divisive. Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin was written published in 1852, and it had a huge impact on how Americans viewed slavery. So prior to that, people had thought that slavery was perhaps a necessary evil that was needed. And after that, especially in the North, people decided that slavery was in fact evil. It really helped the Union's cause in winning the war. And of the book, the writer and abolitionist Frederick Douglass said, who himself was an escaped slave, that Uncle Tom's Cabin was the touching but truthful tale that has rekindled the slumbering embers of anti-slavery zeal into active flames. Pretty powerful stuff. The second thing that I want you to know about the science and storytelling is something called mirroring or neural coupling. And that's that when you're reading, listening to, or watching a story, the same parts of your brain activate as other people who are listening to, reading, or watching that story throughout time. And when it's a live event, such as today, to the storytellers themselves. So stories allow you to insert yourself into the action. If you've ever wondered why so many people feel the force within for the Star Wars franchise, or the magic of Harry Potter, or why they're obsessed with superhero movies, this is why. So this is why it matters to you. Listen to this. Melanie Green at the University of Buffalo studied the power of narratives, stories, and found that people are more likely to change their health lifestyles when they see a character that they identify with making the same changes. So as you're trying to get more people engaged in active transportation, think of the stories that you can tell of real people whose lives have been transformed by taking transit. This is exactly what your audience needs in order to feel engaged. And you don't need to tell the story of just one person, do you? You need to tell stories of people that reflect the whole audience that you want to better get engaged in actually taking transit. And the third scientific reason is hormones and neurotransmitters. So when your brain encounters an emotionally charged and satisfying event, such as a well-told story, it releases cortisol, the stress hormone that super focuses your attention span, oxytocin, the feel-good hormone that again allows you to feel that empathy and connectedness for somebody from a very different set of lenses than the ones you're wearing. And the third one is dopamine. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that does 2 things. So dopamine is the reason why people feel like they've accomplished something simply because they've watched, listened to, or read a story. So that's why we're all so addicted to our entertainment. We feel like we're actually going on those adventures with Luke Skywalker. And dopamine is also the reason why stories are 22 times easier to remember than data alone. The human brain cannot remember data, but wrap it in a story and it can. So yes, do share your data, but wrap it in stories to illuminate it and humanize it and clarify it. So why do we need to be solutions storytellers? Human beings happen to have this weird thing where we have a negativity bias. And that means that we pay more attention to negative information than positive information. And that's why the news media uses the old adage, if it bleeds, it leads. But that leads people to feeling incredibly stressed out and feeling like there's no hope for the future. So enter solutions storytelling. An organization called the Solutions Journalism Network seeks to rebalance news so that everyday people are exposed to stories that help them understand the problems and the challenges, but also includes the possible solutions. So in September of 2020, the Smith Geiger research firm did research on behalf of the Solutions Journalism Network to find out how effective these kinds of stories are. And they found out something interesting. So they surveyed 638 respondents for TV stories. One story was the traditional problem-focused story. The other story was the problem with the solution. And they found out that the problem with solution stories outperformed the traditional problem-only stories in 3 really important ways. Take a look. So the stories that had the solutions in them had more audience appeal, better ratings, and greater impact. And isn't that what we all want today? So if you want a more engaged and confident public, leadership, etc., you've got to tell solution stories. So how the heck do you do this? And again, remember that I'm going to share this with you also in the map that you can download at the end of this, so you don't have to scribble frantically for all the notes. So the backbone of solution storytelling, and again, this is from the Solutions Journalism Network, is the word whole. They use acronym for whole storytelling. So in your story, what response does it address? So what solutions is it? Let's say that you wanted to do a story about rapid transit, bus only lanes. So what solution is this? Is to move many more people more quickly, right? How is it done? What insights does it offer? What are the limitations? So for example, if you only have one rapid transit bus only lane and it's not connected to improving better mobility through transit overall, it's not going to go as far as you want it to, right? And then, of course, here's your data. What evidence does it provide? So we're going to do another brief breakout little session here. I'm going to break out, but we're going to do another little active session where I want you to think of a project or two where you could look through the whole lens. So here I'm going to have it up on the screen for you. What's a project that you could actually write a story about through the whole lens and make sure you hit each of these 5 points? So take just 3 minutes right now and think of 3 stories, 3 different types of stories you could tell about public transit that you're working on and how you could put it through those lenses. And maybe just jot a word or a sentence down really quickly for each one of these points of whole, W-H-O-L-E, okay? So what does it solve? Is it a network of separated bike lanes that's the first mile, last mile for your bus line, your train line? Is it you want to improve how frequently the buses come? Whatever it is, what story or series of stories could you look at through the whole lens? And how would that help your public? So think of 3 stories or 1 story that you can tell through the whole lens. So you're looking at this projects that you could tell through the whole lens from the Solutions Journalism Network. And again, remember, I'm going to share with you my storytelling map that has this information in it as well. But what project are you working on or have worked on or will be working on in the future that you could tell through this whole lens? We just have about 30 seconds to go. So make your final notations. And again, I'm going to have you set this aside in just a second, but keep it at hand because we're going to come back to it. Okay, time to wrap it up. Set that aside. Thank you very much for doing that. And again, we're going to come back to it. So as I said, I'm going to share the PDF link or the link to the PDF of my storytelling kit. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what I put in this kit. Just a few things for you to know about that we're going to add more to your stories. So my storytelling kit focuses on the hero's journey story, and the hero's journey story is the most popular story type of all time. And the reason I focus on hero's journey stories is they're not about winning necessarily, they're about transformation. And that's why you're here today, right? That's who you are. You're a change agent that wants to make public transportation easy, normal, happy, convenient, fun, safe, enjoyable. You've got millions of other things that you could add to it, right? And so the hero's journeys is the lens to look through this. And the reason that I also focus on hero's journey stories is that you need to focus on the stories of individuals rather than groups. And why is this important? There's a very good reason. If you look at the covers of magazines or newspapers, not newspapers, magazines, books, even movie posters, they'll have a lot of characters, but you'll recognize like books and books won't. They usually have just one character. And there's a reason for this. When you actually go into the story, it's only told per one person's point of view at a time, right? So you need to be telling the story of one person at a time. You might decide that you want to have 10 stories. You might decide you want to have 5 stories, whatever array of stories you want to have to show diversity in your storytelling and all the people that can have better lives through public transit. You want to have an array of storytellers, but you need to tell that person's story once at a time. So this is from Ron Getz, who is the director of global content development at the Nature Conservancy. And he said in the report, Stories Worth Telling, readers and listeners have a hard time differentiating among multiple characters. Keep the number of characters to a minimum. Inexperienced producers falsely assume that more voices are better. They're not. So as I end my presentation with you today, I want to do one more little exercise. And I want you to take just a couple of minutes right now. And I want you to write down, you're going to look at the 3 places that you wanted to improve your communications in the next 3 to 6 months. You're going to look at a project that you could, 2 is a project that you could write about or share about through the whole lens. And then the third thing I want you to do now, bringing it all together. Could those 2 be combined? So a place that you want to tell a great story next in a communication, looking through the whole lens, how could you combine those? And if so, who would the hero be? So are you the hero? Is it somebody from your organization, from your board, that's the hero that you want to tell? Or is it somebody in the community or the public that you serve that you'd like to tell the story of? So take 3 minutes right now and see if you can brainstorm a little bit on what that story would be. And I'm going to time us again. What would that story be? Who would be the star of it? And if you're really ambitious, You could do more than one story. You could have from 3 different points of view, 3 different age groups. You could have somebody who isn't able to drive. Maybe they're blind. Maybe they need other mobility help. You could tell the story through their hero's journey lens. Maybe it's a child who takes transit. The opportunities are actually endless when you really start to think of it. But remember, you've got to tell the story through one person's eyes in order to actually help your public see themselves in the story and decide to change their behavior, their way of thinking because of it. So who could you tell the story through? Whose lenses could you tell the story through? And this is actually kind of a next step thing. So we're almost done. We're almost ready for your questions, but this is kind of, I'm leaving you today with your next steps of how you could go away and start thinking about storytelling. You personally, you could get your whole team involved. You can get the community you serve involved. Whose story would you want to tell? A little less than a minute to go. Think about whose story you want to tell and what would it be about? What kind of project? Would it be a bus project? Would it be a train project? Would it be something that's been completed or something that you want to get your mayor and your city council involved in, or a grant proposal you want to write so that you can have the funding to finish an important project? What do you want to tell the story about? Okay, so let's wrap that up. Just a few seconds to go. And I'm going to see if anybody has any questions in the text. And in just a second, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see the text. And here, before I stop sharing my screen, I'm going to let you know how to get in touch with me if you have any questions.